It's nice to be here. I wanted to thank Gail for inviting me to be on and to share a little bit of my story and what brought me to the music and what happened, how my life transformed by the people in the community that I met and the music that I listened to, mimicked, studied, and then my own music that came through me. So one of the first questions is, how did I get into the music, and who was the first jazz musician that I heard? And so just to give you a little bit of background about me, I was always singing. I grew up singing Irish music and listening to polkas, and my mom liked bossa nova, and so I was always singing, and I got into folk music for a period of time. There was a group near where we lived that met and performed live music on the weekends. And that really had a very powerful influence of just singing so often and then learning guitar. I was taking classical piano, but it wasn't until high school I really got into musicals and musical theater. So 2 years out of high school, I was in a play of Bill Danoff's, a musical, and I went to hear one of the other ladies in the play was singing at Newsroom Cafe. So I went down to hear her sing, and I needed a job, and I asked to waitress there. And the next night was Marshall Keyes' group, and Marshall Keyes, Reuben Brown on piano, and it would have either been James King or Steve Novosel on bass, and Steve Williams on drums. So the very first exposure that I had to the music was a live music experience, and it was all of the standards, Oleo, Stolen Moments, I Can't Get Started, all of this type of, Bolivia, this type of repertoire. And this was 1985. So meeting Reuben, what I find so interesting about the music at this higher level, and why I've always thought that the music, what some call jazz, is a higher evolution, is because you can bring anything to it, and it can handle that punch or that embrace, and it can transform it and heal it. So for me, I know that I brought a lot of things that needed to be healed. So, and a lot of imbalance, a lot of like parallel living in America. I had never heard the word jazz. I had never heard who Miles Davis was until 1985, until I was, met Marshall, and he really generously made me a tape, talked to me about the music. He was more of an educator in terms of guiding what to listen to. Reuben Brown, he was very curious. He was very much interested in knowing why I was gravitating to the music. And he wanted to help me understand that too. And he made himself available he came out to where I was living at the time in Upper Marlboro one day. He drove out, he sat at the piano, and we just sang, and he played songs and talked to me. And he said, I really would like you to go to UDC. You can come down and sing with me, but you really need to I think he wanted me to be a part of the community. I think he could tell that I'm a very open person. And I think he could tell that I should be in the community, because that is how the music comes through on a higher level, is within community. So, but I didn't really come by that naturally. So that's one thing of the sort of the the drive, the create, the impetus for me to go out and listen and be social and meet a lot of different people, and have this sort of wanting to connect and always wanting to hear the music. And I would always say it's feeding my soul, and it was. So at that time, I actually, when Gail invited me to be a part of this, I went through some old tapes, and just to kind of get an understanding of stuff. And this is my ticket to the Thelonious Monk, the T-Monk Gala Tribute at DAR. And this was October 6th, 1986. What is today? Today's not the 6th. Oh, today's the 5th. Okay, so tomorrow is my anniversary. But this was an incredible concert, because it was a combination of New York musicians coming down. It was the first time I heard Branford Marsalis and Tane, and Winton was on it, and actually a really interesting Danish woman, Ursula Duziak, and David Amram. It was just this real variety of all different kinds of artists, and they were all incredible. And so after that, I knew that I wanted, I wanted to sing more. I wanted to study. But what happened was, Ruben had said to go to UDC, but what happened was I was at a gathering, a Finnish gathering, and I won a round trip ticket to Finland. So I was listening to a lot of music. I did. One of your other questions is, what was the first album that I purchased? And the first album that I purchased was Shirley Horn's Garden of the Blues. Now, a blessing was I had already heard Shirley live. She used to come down to Newsroom before, I believe, the Steeplechase and the Verve, her connection with Verve being on the label. She would come down and sit in, and Ruben would just get right up off the piano, and she would sit down and play, and it was incredible. Sometimes she wouldn't sing; she would just play with the trio. It was really an incredible experience to be alive at that time, and to have followed my intuition and the invitation of other people to come out, hear the music. So so there was a very large community at that time in DC, right before I went to that Finnair sponsored picnic. At the time, I was waitressing, and at night, and also on my off nights, I would go to Philly's Finest, Les Nices, Twins Lounge, One Step Down, and then I would go hear Ronnie Wells at, I believe it's called Lenny's, but I can't quite. It was down off of Thomas Circle. But at that time, I was going and listening all the time to different groups, Charlie Young, Steve Williams, listening to Bob Buddha and Jeff Harper. I love that group. Trying to think of who. And then I was going to One Step Down, and hearing, all of the international artists and national artists that came through there with Amabuchi and Joe. So I was at a gathering of Finns that I had met the friend of mine, Mervi, and I won the door prize, and it was a round trip ticket to Finland. And so I am a free spirit, and I felt it was the right thing to do. And so I went to Finland, and I, instead of waitressing at first, I actually picked strawberries in a field. But I went to Pori Jazz Festival with Tita, And Miles uh, was drawn to Tita, and he invited her and I to Germany for the weekend. So it seemed so strange to me that of within a year or two of really just listening to Miles's music, um, sort of being open to this music and just letting it take me where it takes me, I was having all these really incredible experiences. There was a lot of freedom. There wasn't a lot of mental thought or restriction to what I felt my life was supposed to be. It was okay, this feels great, do what feels great. And it did become that I was doing the next right thing. And so I went to Germany. I met Kenny Garrett. I met Mino Sinaloo, Daryl Jones, and went back to Finland, became a DJ, and started learning on the side, listening and learning, putting together a set list. And I did some of my first gigs in Finland at a club called Cafe Orpheus. And I met a lot of wonderful, I don't know if you know Jarmo Savolainen, just an incredible person. He has since passed away, but he was just an absolutely incredible pianist. Haka Virtanen, Heikki Sandren, and there's one other pianist that for some reason I'm blocking, but there were these incredible jazz musicians and community. So I started to get some gigs, and I went and heard other people, but I really felt like it was time to come back home and head over to UDC. So I went to UDC. Let me see what year that was. That would have been like 1980, 89, 90, 91, 92. Right around that period. So at that time, I was going to UDC. I was working at One Step Down waitressing, and I met George Colligan and David F. Ross, Aaron Walker, James King. Had more. I was actually pursuing to be a vocalist, so a little bit of that got on me, where I wanted to have a set list and get and understand the elements, the trading, the form, the sing it straight down, then improvise, because all that was new to me. There wasn't any music before this music that had any of those elements that I had been a part of before. So when that happened, I was in DC till 96. And when you ask me what people, how did they influence me or my mentors? When I was at UDC for the study part, Calvin really wanted me to, he told me something that I still do to this day, which is I sing everything that I'm going to work on. I sing it as a ballad. Later on, I actually heard that Pablo Casals literally claims that why he didn't play a wrong note was because he would not move through a piece that he was studying without knowing exactly what it was. And it was something very similar. Calvin really taught me that ballads can be way slower than I thought, and to move through every piece like that first. And it's almost like an entrainment. I think for me, it felt like that. And I think he was probably aware at the time that I needed more grounding and to go slower when I go to put my spirit in breath over my vocal cords into a resonation that has come through somebody else as a composition. So it was like, that was what he was telling me to do. So that was really beautiful. He's also, if I wanted to be honest about some of the healing parts, he's probably the first person that ever said no to me. And I really needed UDC. There was definitely a bifurcation in my childhood and in my adulthood where if I had not come to the music, I wouldn't have had the healing that I needed. That would it's not that how do I put this into words? I didn't think about this. It's that it would have come up in my life even without me knowing it, had I not been in the presence of the music. So it was a blessing because music has messages even without lyric. There's a language, there's emotion. That's the one thing that struck me so deeply when I first heard Marshall Keys and Reuben Brown and Steve Noza and Steve Williams. It was a full body experience to hear music that contained emotions that had never really been brought up in the music that I had heard and grew up with. So it was needed for me. And that's why I had made just a total commitment to this music. So from really entering as a complete beginner and student and having mentors, I would say Reuben and Professor Calvin Jones. And then I went and studied with Grady Tate, who was one of the most generous people. I mean, he basically let me go to Howard and just show up and study with him. And, the thing that sometimes when you think of, well, what did they actually teach you? What were they have, it's more like there was a beginning of a friendship and a real friendship develops. It's a lifelong friendship. And sometimes it's just listening to, exchanging, singing choruses back to back, or being offered, inspiration of who to listen to and how to, just to keep, because there's so much, just so many incredible artists to check out that have, their own personal fingerprint that's just beautiful. So those were the in-person mentors. But at one point I started to listen to Abby Lincoln, and at first I just gravitated to her music, and it was full of not only beautiful lyric for a song, but like a philosophy for women that clearly it wasn't on my mind to get married. I was solely self-focused on, my own personal development, my own art, my own, one thing that Abby says, she says, I met my art before I met anybody. I met my music before I met any man. And I'll never put away my music for anybody, nor would I expect a man to put away anything that he has for me. And, that's what I needed to hear. That's okay. And I know she is known for that philosophy, for walking away from what could have been a very lucrative career in America, performing songs like the Sex Kitten, you know, and she met Max and embraced that and healed and moved through to be, to be a part of something, to be a part of something genuine. And to one thing that she says is that she wants women to be able to compose and to sing about something that is not in direct relationship to a man. And that really affected me. I mean, that affected me just as much as my relationships with Grady and with studying with Grady and with Calvin Jones and Reuben Brown. I think Abby and my mom, I really should thank my mom because she allowed me to be myself. And it hasn't been an easy ride. So, but at the reason why I brought that up is because that was more like a sort of a connection with elders. But what happened is that there's something really beautiful that happens when you have an elder or a mentor, and that's you're just soaking up everything. But you have to have that period where you're going to start making mistakes. You're going to be more courageous than you probably would be when you're studying or working with an elder. I don't know if that's true, but for me, I needed that time then after that where I met George, and uh, we performed and trial and error with stuff. I mean, he said I took a lot of liberties, but I also let musicians take a lot of liberties. I've always loved, because I'm going for that vibrational essence that I feel I first was drawn into. I don't consider the vocalist coming from a place of having to look a certain way at the mic and just sing it straight, give a little something, and the man just play, the same way behind it. So I think that was a very good, a very, very good intuition of mine. And after that period, I moved to New York City. And I really wasn't focused on career. I had to go back to Abby again. One of the things that she said is arts are for character building. And I think that although sometimes it feels like it would be great to just have this incredible career that's, seems to be the answer to financial worry, but really, I guess I'm old enough now to see that it really isn't. It's a headache sometimes. It's not everything. It's not without its flaws and with its challenges. So I appreciate what I have been experiencing, which was more of the indie jazz artist career, which was what I could handle at the time. The interesting thing, even without having a strong focus on how do I meet the right people? How do I get the right stuff? I actually was still developing. So I was meeting a lot of musicians that were my age, that were doing the same thing as me. They came to New York. They want to be a part of something that's not happening in their own city. And through that, I met Dana Murray, Eric Rivas, Gregoire Murray. And Dana, he actually heard some, I think, well, actually it was Eric. Okay. Eric heard some of my tunes, and Dana heard some of my tunes, and they got to talking, and Dana was the one that got the demo deal. So I really wouldn't have been in pursuit of recording my originals. I still had a desire to prove that I can sing jazz. It kind of can be a part of the scene. But I'm so grateful that there were people that were encouraging me um, to go ahead and record, document my compositions, because it really was, it was something that I need to do. That was more more of an honest representation of the music, because it's my fingerprint. It's my my experiences. So and the way that those originals came about. So the first time when I moved from DC up to New York, that was the first time that I worked in an all white environment. I had never been, because I was, from DC, Maryland area. My bosses were Black. My coworkers were Black. The New York experience was a little heavy for me initially. There was, it was fodder for a lot of intense feelings that ended up just pouring out. The very first original that came through that was a poem was Black Gandhi, and then the next one was Rice and Memphis followed. So there was a little cluster there of, and it was all just sort of happening. I was working by day, like I said, at this headhunter firm, and then going back home to Brooklyn, and I would feel a poem come on, and so I would start to write it down, and just watch. And the lyrics were really, they did not have. I'm glad that they couldn't find a place initially out here, because that's why they were so concentrated in lyrics. So one day, I was at the Brooklyn Museum, and I opened up an atlas, and I saw that Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis in Egypt were parallel. And within a very short amount of time, I was writing this poem. Years of freedom of speech left us with nothing to talk about. They don't tell me, but I hear in Memphis, you can get to Memphis. It's not far from the Delta, with those secrets below the belt that lie in your mouth, with all the gold that rhymes with stolen soul. Why some people can't stand to see you smile. Pictures worth 1,000 words in frames in that man's mouth. These poems started coming through, and I almost didn't quite. I didn't know, how this was happening, but I knew that I definitely was open and allowing. And then I was working at as a receptionist, and I was at a gathering for work, and I literally bumped into somebody from Hottest Poets. Like, I literally turned and bumped into this guy, and he's passing out these flyers, and he's like, "Hey, you a poet?" And I was like, "Yes." And and I had my 3 poems. I had my Memphis and my Black Gandhi, and I told my friends, and we all went up, and I was crying. They were crying. Folks were crying. And it was a lot of the things that didn't seem to, I don't know how to describe it, but there were things that happened to me in my childhood that didn't quite have any resolution. They didn't get talked about. They just sat in me, simmering. And one of the events, two events that really stick out. And one is that, so when my parents were divorced, we went to church at Holy Family. Oh, it's 5:30. Okay, I'm just going to finish up this. um, and and the and the uh, and the lady that worked at the rectory, the cleaning lady, was Veronica. And one day I was about 10, and she came to me and she said, I want to show you something. And she went and pulled out the book that was the photos of the founders, and she said, "This is my family, the founders of Holy Family Church." And she said they put the cornerstone in. And I remember looking at her family and people of color, and basically the church had evolved into almost all white. There was one mass, the 9 o'clock, where Thelma Queen played organ. So it was very segregated. It was a very segregated experience. And so when I was in Brooklyn years later, I had been hanging out with Roy, and we got into this little discussion about racism. And he said, racism's passe or corny. And it just stuck there. And so I went back to my apartment, and it came through. Isms passe or corny. Try and kiss a brother on the 4 in the morning. Watch the heads revolve around like a new day's exercise in a dawning sun. Come down to earth. These days and moon ain't new. We got to find a little kindness before it's through. She from Queens, and she'll tell you too, it turns more than her head to see me with you, but she's been through hard times with you and her mother too. Her reflection in a lake, Kim. Mother Nature, make no mistake. But when you take that double, take me and mine with you, because it's love or it's the lack of. It's fear, or I fear it's just here, so damn uncomfortable. I'm giving up on forever, for real. But my mother didn't raise no fool. My father didn't raise nobody. Maybe that's why I'm here with you. So that's new housing cropped up and snuffed out the old tobacco barns. Development was in a race to dry out the unowners of Bowie Farms, and busing drove my folks to send me to Catholic school, away from harm. God loved the Southern charm. Something evil scared the parish till it turned all white, except Neelan. He was the oldest of, should I say, St. John's or Columbus Knights. Veronica stayed on, kept the rectories tight, and now you staring at me with your North Face on like it's all right. So those things started happening once I got some exposure to the music. And so even though I feel that I could have had the poetry come through, but studying and hearing the harmony, it wouldn't have had a place. It wouldn't have had that musical vibration to support it. And so that's why I've always, when I came out of the idea of an image of being a certain singer, and just be myself and compose, I always go to musicians that have come from the music, jazz. And so what I love about, you asked me about what projects I have. What I love about the most recent project is that I got to pull from all of it. I got to invite musicians, Paul Bolenbach, Raymond Angry, musicians that I knew from DC, Tim Warfield. Oh my God, what a gentleman and a dear heart. And Raymond Angry, just so supportive. He and I talked through a lot of stuff. He knew that I wanted to produce it, and I know that made him nervous at times to want to, be more involved in this. But it was he's been very supportive still. And that I, with the liberties that I have like gone for myself, and I wanted to experience within a band and within a group of musicians, I feel that this album is the closest ever. So I'm just going to end on this note. We redid a couple things. We redid a couple that Memphis and Rice, but there's new songs too, and Given to the Left and Compassion. But I'm going to play a little bit of Memphis because, and I'll make it quick here. But I reached out. I went back to Abby, and I asked Jay Newland to mix Memphis. So this is the first song the single that I'm going to be dropping, and this is entitled Memphis. And I hope it's not going to be too loud. But I'll let you hear a little bit of it. Any advice that I have to other vocalists or musicians would just be to stay open and follow their heart and stay in community with artists that are on that path. Seekers. Taurus Mateen on bass. He's the heartbeat of this song. Eric Harlan's on drums.
Nothing to talk about. They don't tell me, but I hear. I hear Memphis, you could get to Memphis. It's not far from the Delta, with those secrets below the belt. Freedom of speech left.
Josh Evans is on trumpet. George Burton's on piano. George and Josh I met in DC. Josh has actually played on some of the Abbey tributes. I didn't really get to that. But if you go to HeidiMartin.com, you'll see some of the work of the tribute show that I wrote.
Pictures worth 1,000 words in frames in that black man's mouth. Like Tennessee and Egypt, Africa left her shaping our years. Why did it take so long to heal?
So thank you so much, Gail. I'm sorry that it's an interesting challenge to speak endlessly because without any interview experience, because I do go on. But thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about what I've been doing and the journey that got me here. I'm really looking forward to sharing this album, Gifts and Sacrifices. Incredible musicians and spirits on it. They all contributed. I mean, really, I had a vision, but their contribution was really the production part of it, to be honest. So I feel very blessed. And I see some folks. Thank you for peace to you, and thank you. I do try to tell the truth. It's an interesting balance these days, but I appreciate the others that have told me the truth, and I try to speak the truth as well. So thanks so much.